Today, you need to have capabilities in defining your target audience, understanding who they are really well and where to find them, to turn that understanding into a easily executable, simple, multi-screen media plan with efficiency and effectiveness as its core goals against your audience and KPIs, and finally, having transparent, audience-based, and outcome-based measurement that shows how successful you actually were. And doing that in a unified way across screens, across tactics, across inventory pools. For that reason, we think the power of and also means partnership, working together. Because of the fragmentation of inventory these days, but also the fragmentation of data, fragmentation of capabilities, we believe in the need to come together. That just doesn't go for our agency partners and our direct-to-brand partners, but it means working with the programmers that, as well on data-enabled capabilities, and it means working with data companies with the direct partnership, and it means partnering with measurement and analytics specialists to tell one cohesive story of finding your audience, putting a relevant message in front of them wherever and whenever they consume video, and showing that it worked. Here's some examples of how we've been successful in the marketplace today, along with some capabilities that we've recently announced in tandem with our rebrand. One of which is data-driven linear. I think many of you guys are familiar with. We're active in this space, as are most of the programmers. This refers to identifying who your key audience is and determining the highest indexing media vehicles to reach that audience. Networks, day parts, geos, or a combination of all three. Addressable TV is the main topic we'll talk about today. This means uniquely targeting a household list of a strategic audience segment that's important to you, and uniquely executing a targeted campaign against those homes. Finally, OTT, CTV, obviously really important words as well. We want to be active in this space too. We've recently established a trading platform at Ampersand that gives us an entryway into this, where at the end of the day, we're looking to unify the execution and measurement against all three of these strategies. What we're going to talk about today is the addressable landscape, how to be successful with it, what some myths and realities are of what's happening with that capability today. And the reason is because we think addressable, that word is having a moment, and the tactic and the strategy is having a moment. We think in 2019 there will be over $2.5 billion spent in addressable television. That represents actually still a fairly small amount of total TV ad spend, less than 4%. But what that says to me is, one, why is it still so small? But two, everyone in this room thinks it's going to grow, so how can we prepare to be successful with this tactic in the future? So what I'd like to do is talk about some myths of why this might be the case, and the reality of how to take advantage of the opportunity. So one myth, why is that number still less than 4%, is because I think a lot of marketers are still saying, well, I'm already active a ton with national network media. That's enough. I don't need to get into an addressable TV execution. What we see is that's not quite always the case. National network TV is still by far the best, if not only, mass reach vehicle at this kind of scale. We looked at a financial advertiser and analyzed their national campaign over the course of a quarter, and saw that for their strategic audience, which is in-market prospects, they were successfully reached 93% of that audience over the quarter that we looked at. Sounds great, but it's more complicated than that. If you drill down into, well, let's just look at an individual month, the number actually drops to 77%, meaning in any given month, this brand was missing nearly a quarter of their strategic audience with the national network strategy. But even that doesn't tell the full story, because every marketer has a frequency goal. So if you drill down even further, let's say your goal was to reach your audience once per week. Now that number drops to 61%. And finally, if your goal is even more robust than that, just a simple 3 times per week frequency goal, you're all the way down to 17% of this strategic audience that was hit by their national network media. 83% of their audience was not reached adequately according to this brand's frequency goal. So what we've done is develop an approach that we call national TV extension. In other words, can you define a target audience that is based on those in the market that were underexposed to your national TV strategy. So in this case, in the case I just went through, if that financial brand's frequency goal was 3 times per week, define your audience for those homes that were not exposed 3 or more times to your campaign, and uniquely target them with an addressable campaign. The reason we think this is important is because a national TV strategy more quickly than ever is topping off. Builds incredible mass reach very quickly, but then stays there. We think this is an approach that's useful to bend the curve and start driving incremental reach to the homes that matter most to you. So we said, let's prove this. Let's see if it works. We worked with an auto advertiser to take off their national baseline buy and say, let's invest a lot more money in additional dollars through that same national network strategy, and then let's take the same amount and invest it in a national TV extension approach, addressably targeting the underexposed homes to your campaign. And in this case, what we saw for the traditional approach, we added another $1 million and drove 2.3 incremental reach points on top of the 7.7 million homes that already had saw the ad. But then if you compare that to the addressable strategy, putting those dollars in a national TV extension approach, addressably targeting the underexposed, you see superior results. Same baseline, 7.7 million homes that saw the national campaign to begin with, but now nearly 3 times as many incremental homes that were reached by this campaign, 6.4 incremental reach points. The same thing will hold if we layer on frequency goals. Now it's going to be even harder to drive those results because of the additional requirements to reach these homes adequately, and you'll see the story remains the same. If the if the frequency goal was reaching them once a week, this national TV extension approach increases reach by 5%. And in the case of the 3 times a week, most robust definition of finding your audience adequately, 18% increase in reach, thanks to this approach. But what I want to emphasize is it's not just all about reach for its own sake. I also mentioned that we believe outcome-based measurement is critical here too. And the great news about this is by layering on an addressable strategy to your national buy, you can drive superior results as well on the bottom line. This is looking at a case study that we did with a retailer that ran a national campaign simultaneous to an addressable campaign with us. What we see here is for the national campaign alone, homes that only saw the national media, a really strong $15.5 million in incremental revenue. Great. Those homes that saw only the addressable campaign, a smaller number, but still a really powerful one, nearly $1 million in incremental revenue. Also great. But the reality is these tactics work really well together in driving synergistic results on the bottom line. What does that mean? That for those homes on the right-hand side that saw both of these types of ads in their national network buy and an addressable environment, $13 more revenue per exposed home. These are working together in a superior way that drives superior results, totaling nearly $8 million in incremental revenue that we can tie to an addressable campaign. So this says to me, whether it's driving reach, whether it's driving results, there's reason to be in utilizing addressable tactics, even if you're already super active in national media. But then you might say, well, okay, that makes sense, but it's too expensive. I can't afford it. The CPMs are just way too high. And what I would say to that is, one, you're right, the CPMs for addressable television are high, but looking at those in a vacuum or compared to your linear CPMs for their own sake is not quite the right way to look at this. We said this is all about the power of and how these work together. We think a better way to evaluate the CPMs of an addressable buy in collaboration with your national spend is using a metric we like to call RECPM or Reach CPM. It's not just about how many homes you're reaching, it's about how many incremental homes or incremental 1,000 homes you can drive reaching with the extra dollar. That's where we think you'll see the efficiency of addressable TV come into play. Here's an example. We worked with an advertiser that was active in national media for 8 weeks and then added on an addressable buy for the next 8 weeks, where they were still active in national media as well. What we saw is that incremental reach was driven nearly 2 times more via the TV extension addressable strategy that we just talked about. But on top of that, it was incredibly efficient. It was half the cost to drive an additional 1,000 homes reached, an incremental 1,000 homes reached through this addressable tactic than it was by just layering more and more dollars through the same national network schedules that this advertiser was already buying. Make sense? Okay, so addressable is important. We think it drives reach. We think it drives outcomes. We think there's ways it can actually be efficient for the dollars that we're spending there. How do we do it? One thing is we think it is critical that when you're executing an addressable campaign to not be choosy about how you're necessarily reaching those homes. You want to find the audience that matters to you wherever and whenever they're watching TV. We see a lot of marketers today that are interested in dabbling in addressable, saying, you know what though, if it's not in the regular linear environment, call me when that's ready at scale. Well, linear addressable is ready today. We're active in it at Ampersand today, but it's not the only place we're active. We're active in an on-demand environment with addressable media like VOD, TVE. And that's important because that's just as valuable, if not more so, than a linear addressable campaign is for its own sake. This is a case study we ran with an auto advertiser that ran same creative, same amount of dollars, same amount of frequency in a linear and an on-demand addressable combined campaign. And we isolated the two tactics to see how effective they each were at driving sales lift, driving cars driven off the lot. And what we saw is same audience, same frequency, same spend. The VOD performance in driving sales lift was nearly 5 times higher than what the linear environment did. Linear was good too, but the VOD in this case drove even superior results. And it's not only true in auto. Here's a travel example where we targeted in-market travel consumers, measured behavior through pixeling the travel advertiser's website to show engagement with that brand after the campaign. Same story. The VOD piece of that campaign, the on-demand addressable piece of that campaign was nearly twice as effective at driving that in-market consideration of the brand compared to what the linear addressable portion was able to drive. So how do we do this? One, make sure you find your audience wherever and whenever they are consuming video. But two, make sure you have a really robust understanding of that audience as well. One thing we've seen is that if you're just thinking about this to say, well, if this is a way to find light TV viewers more easily, we're saying that's not enough. It seems really easy to say, hey, homes are watching TV, or at least traditional TV, less than ever. There's fragmentation across the landscape. So if I find the lightest TV viewers, that should get me where I need to go. We worked with, this is the financial advertiser from earlier, to say, let's profile those that you missed. Remember that according to their frequency goal. Let's look at who the unreachables really are and to see if they are best described as light TV viewers. So of those unreachables, how many of them would fall into the highest viewing bucket of total television? How many would fall into the medium bucket? How many would fall into the lowest bucket? And what we saw was only half of those unreachables, of that list of homes that didn't see adequately this financial advertiser's campaign, only half were among the lowest total TV viewers. Why is this important? One, because if you're then going to say, well, I'll just target that low TV viewer, you're missing half of your unreached audience. And two, that means you're talking to that audience, those that you've reached already, again, when you may not have needed to. The reason that we see this phenomenon again and again with other advertisers is that every audience is different. It's not just that all low TV viewers behave alike. They don't. Viewers interact with television in different ways. Different audiences interact with television in different ways. You need to define your audience most specifically as directly as you can to drive your business outcome. So this is why we think addressable is such a critical part of the media mix today. We think it works well with the national TV investment. We think it works well with the other capabilities that I referenced earlier that I'd be happy to talk about in more detail later this week, of a data-driven linear approach or a CTV, OTT extension. Why? Because not only can you find underexposed consumers, target them efficiently, drive business outcomes, but you can find strategic audiences much more efficiently as well and have these tactics blend together where appropriate. That's everything that I have for you today. Questions, meet answers, room, meet Justin. I'll be around later if I'd be happy to talk about this in more detail.